general news. Presidential will not be able to make it tonight, unfortunately, but that is fine. That's not crucial, and it'll only go for a little bit. I'm not going to take too much time just rambling about the news. Then we'll get into House Stark and Company versus CTO. It's Carthago. Starfuse is here on behalf of House Stark. We were going to have Krampus here. He is not here. I don't know if David will be able to make it tonight or not. So, in the event that we don't have a voice representative, I'll play devil's advocate. But then Ashwin is here from TFP, and then depending upon if the people that said they would show up. We'll have Roberts, Prefontaine, and Velyni Vass. Currently, only Vass is here out of those three, so we might end up a little empty-handed tonight, but that's all right. And so, I guess you guys have the option to ask any questions, but I think we're good to just jump into the recent news of import. So, no, never empty with you here, Vass. So, the primary thing, and the reason we actually invited Prefontaine on tonight, is food and resources in the game in general. They're still haywire. The war against Fortuna didn't really do much, nor has wartime in general done much to put a dent in food. So consumption changes are being planned and are coming. I'm sure that you've all reviewed the polls in politics and war news here. So not even going to remind you guys to go vote there, but it's some interesting changes that hopefully we'll have the opportunity to review with Pre actually here later on. In terms of actual news, you had the Fortuna piece a while back, and the war surpassed $1 trillion in damages, it was nice to get a war that size again, but it seems that unless we get a bit of a more even matchup between larger spheres, because this one was a dog pile. So unless you get a more even matchup, 1 trillion more seems unlikely to happen again anytime soon. Trumpy joined TKR sphere, no big surprise there. Aurora signed a couple of O levels, and then you had today's war that we are going to get to between yesterday's war, House Stark and Guardian against Carthago. Then TFP, we'll also review their neutrality. So, or should I say alleged neutrality? All right, I guess Star, I'll throw you an invite. I don't anyone. This is going to be oh, David, you're here. If you're able to come on, David, no worries. If you're not, no worries. Just let me know. We were relying on the big man, the big K, to be here, but he appears to not be able to make it tonight. So if we have to yell back and forth between voice and text at Carthago members, we can do that too. But Starfuse, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. So I assume most people have a general understanding of this war, but for those that may not, or that may just not care to pay attention to it, would you be able to kind of relay the CB in shorthand terms first?
Yeah, of course. So, going back to when House Stark, Order of the White Rose, and Carthago were tied, um, OWR and Carthago had started event or a joint venture in a bank called the Foundation, in which shares were mostly owned by OWR and Carthago at that point. Krampus was the CEO. How Stark joined said bank, and we became a major shareholder. Um, Things continued as normal. When Nexus eventually broke up, and when OWR disbanded, we decided that we wished to withdraw our funds because they'd be better spent just growing ourselves versus sitting in a bank. Um, we had been in negotiations with Carthago for essentially a year at this point, and nothing had really occurred or nothing had changed in that time. So we decided that we wanted to pursue a more adventurous way of recouping our investment. So we declared on Cathargo last night.
All right. And to, I guess, go into a little bit more depth on this one, the argument has been not the returning of your investment, but the valuation of it. Um, for example, the argument is not the returning of your money that you gave to them, but the returning of the new valuation of that money that's been used to create profit that the bank has kept on hand. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
Okay. And what's the discrepancy here? What are we looking at numbers
So
wise?
yeah, back when we first joined, House Stark bought 2.6 million shares at 1,000 PPU each, and then when we wished to withdraw in July 25th, 2022, our shares were valued at 3,240 PPU. This number was provided us by the CEO Krampus himself. So we're looking at a discrepancy of 2.6 billion versus 8.424 something billion. So around 5-6 billion difference.
Okay. And I see I'm just scrolling through your the statement of facts, which is admittedly a very extended document.
Yeah,
Um, Now you guys have also said you alleged in your declaration of war, obviously the primary issue that you guys were claiming was this difference in valuation, but you also said that the you guys were not allowed to view financials. Is
that's
that
correct.
accurate?
Yes. Yes. So we had been, or multiple offers were uh, given to us by the CEO, and none of them were really more close to what our money was per se. And we weren't given any sort of documents. Like we never got a list of loan holders when there was an involvement where or an arrangement where we were to take on 4 billion in loans. We never got a list. We asked for it 3 times, never got it. And there generally has just been a withholding of all important bank documentation or documentation that should be provided to shareholders, which kind of we were a little bit lost because there was no evidence per se of why things were valued at the way they were, and we weren't really given any context as to why things are what Carthago says, at least.
Now you guys have as one of your CVs, one of your claims, that Carthago has either willfully, to summarize here, misallocated funds or purposefully stolen funds
Yes.
regarding the foundation.
So the reason for that being is because I mean, when OWR disbanded and their shares were put into the pool of the foundation or the foundation pool, there isn't anymore an offshore specifically designed for foundation funds, and the only offshore that does exist is one for Carthago. So thus, the funds that would have been received from OWR and the money that would have been made by the increase in profit of our shares would have went to the Carthago offshore instead of some third-party fund. So thus, it would be in their offshore, and you know.
And you no longer necessarily expect repayment, but more so to deal enough damage that you consider the whole thing justified.
Yes.
Vass, I believe now, Star, you can, of course, if you see, Vass asks, why didn't you just withdraw when Nexus dissolved? I believe, am I correct in the statement that you guys made the attempt
So
to begin that?
it wasn't exactly at the point in which Nexus dissolves, but it was around 3 months or so after that. I believe Nexus dissolved in around March or so, and then we went to them with what we wanted in July, and so it was March to July. So about 3 months. We were told that, or we were at least encouraged to keep our shares, and we were essentially told that just because we weren't allied anymore, that we wouldn't like have any issues, but obviously that wasn't the case. But we did at least seek to withdraw 3 months after Nexus did implode.
Okay.
When we
It
initially
was a
reached,
delayed.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, you're good. It was a delayed liquidation request.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to go ahead and answer, Vass.
Oh yeah. So when we reached out to Carthago about liquidating the bank, let me see here. I know that the initial, I believe, okay, so they weren't initially valued at 8 billion, or at least we didn't receive an offer for 8 billion initially. But let's see, I believe we were asked, instead of selling our shares to Carthago directly, to sell them to a third party, which we tried to do. We attempted to reach out to a few alliances. When that didn't happen, we received an offer for $3 or $4 billion. This wasn't accepted, and then later on, we received an offer for $8 billion to be paid out over 8 months, so $1 billion a month, from the CEO himself. So that was made on February 8th, so around 4 months ago.
So I think the summary here, Vass, is they bought it at 1,000 per share, 2.6 million shares, and they were stated evaluation in their statement of facts. It was 3,240 per share, which
I
comes
believe
out to a
equates to
good
around
chunk.
around 8.4 billion. At least just based off of share price and not liquidation amount.
So that's the big difference there. Let's click on this, and this way the screenshot that Borg posted is clear. Let's see. Yes, so the screenshot that you've posted, Borg, go ahead, Vass. The screenshot that you've posted was well before they then began working on asking liquidations.
Is there stakeholder screenshot around with that valuation? Let me look really quick. I mean, I believe it should be posted in 0. Okay, let's see. So I'll post this screenshot.
Star, confirm
Okay.
for me. I think that's the one
Yeah.
that I put it in the
Yes, that is
Balkans.
the screenshot in which
Yes.
he provides that valuation to us.
So there is that. I think from Parthago's perspective, the shares, the arguments that I've seen put out, let me put it that way,
Yeah.
in terms of specifically looking at the share valuation, was that that was a valuation given without accounting for any
Yeah.
losses that could be incurred during liquidation. No, Zig, no one started another exchange. It's just the banks have been able to sell shares and remain themselves separately. Valuation of the shares can be done either by the market, which I think was the original argument here, was that these shares should not be worth market value pricing, or they're done by the business, which in this case, the business's valuation, it would be the one that I provided in that screenshot a few messages up.
Yeah. Um, the issue with that defense, I understand that there are things to be accounted for, is the fact that Krampus himself agreed to, or at least sent us an offer in which he offered 8 billion
Oh,
for our shares. So that would mean that our shares are worth 8 billion, as they were valued by this CEO. I mean, I get that share price isn't exactly a perfect way of measuring how much somebody owns, but if we were offered 8 billion in exchange for our stake in the company, then our stake in the company is worth 8 billion. So, and they went back on that agreement.
so Piggy, think, and if you, you just got home, if you or David want to come on, you're more than welcome to. We could use a CTO representative here. Starfuse, if you want to check out that ROH,
I will, yeah.
you might be able to go after that.
Okay, so just going off the TLDR itself, I know Pig had said this earlier in Balkans about how the bank is currently valued at 4.5 billion, which means that obviously 8 billion is not our, or would at this point not be the correct amount. But the issue lies within the fact that we asked for this money a year ago and not now, in which the bank was in a much better state. We received an evaluation in April. It was April 8th. We received a buyout offer for $22 billion. Krampus said himself. So I don't see how it would have went from $22 billion to $4.5 billion in the span of a month and a half before we looked to withdraw from the bank. So obviously the bank was worth more money than when we looked to take part in these agreements than it is now a year later.
That's an interesting point. If looking at the screenshot, Krampus's, this is direct quotation from Krampus, so that no one thinks I'm, TLDRing his words. Direct quotation here is on April 8th, 2022. By the way, we were offered 22 billion to buy us out. It's pretty much just book valuation. End quote. I would admittedly be confused as to where the remainder of that came from.
I mean, it's been said obviously that there were some loans out that may have made the number look a bit smaller or a little bit larger than it is in reality. But 4.5 billion is quite a way from 22 billion. So I don't believe that that's how many loans were out. But
Yeah, that would absolutely be my question to Carthago to address at some point, which I do not see listed in your ROH, Piggy, just so that we're clear on that one. The 22 billion, quote unquote, that's the book valuation in April. How did that change so drastically? And if it didn't change drastically and was just an incorrect valuation, my follow-up question would then be, why didn't you guys take the offer? If somebody offers to pay me,
for
150 bucks for a textbook that I know is only worth 100, what's the logic on the denial of that kind of offer? So I don't know. It's more probably follow-up
you're
questions to
saying
ask, but
if you're asking whether or not how Stark accepted this offer, we accept the offer and then we followed up with them on just getting $8 billion.
oh no,
So
I
it's
was
not
I was
like we
referring to the
rejected this.
22.
No, no, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no. So the 8 goes, the defense against that is that Krampus said he'd get back to you guys, and so
Yeah,
the I get back to you invalidates it as an offer and makes it more of a quotation, a potential quote.
yeah. I mean, we understand that obviously. I mean, you should probably consult your gut before agreeing to these things. But even if it wasn't an exact number, I would expect that it's not only a third of the offered number. I don't see why, if the shares were valued at 2.6 billion, that Krampus would tell us it was worth 8 billion. It should be somewhere close to 8 billion and not just a random number that he threw out. So either he lied about our shares being worth 8 billion, or that he was willing to pay for them, or they were worth 8 billion and he went and then he agreed to it. So it's just that they shouldn't
I've been
be
talking
overvalued by that much.
I've been talking to Piggy and Piggy's not even listening, so that's
But
embarrassing here. So let's see here. I think we've had a bit of a ramble here. Schwinn, I'm gonna invite you to come on because I think anything else here is gonna be a little more circular. Um and
Hello.
so alrighty, he's here. Yeah, I see Monty. That's why I'm laughing because I was talking directly to Piggy, and Piggy's not listening. All right, Schwinn, give us the pacifist rant on how war is bad.
Yeah. Well, we have to stay true to our name, I think, and we did a lot of the fighting the past month and a half. So now we've got to do more of the pacifist stuff. So it's all part of the charter and everything. Nothing I can do about it, but the rules are the rules. But no, in seriousness, um, this this issue between House Stark and CTO, it's their issue between them. When we signed, we had signed House Stark in I think October, maybe October, September, something around then, and CTO in January, I guess. So since January, when we were tied to both, um, I've made several attempts, either messaging Taxia, Jax, David, Campus even, to try and help come to a solution. But A, either we weren't able to, or B, we were even asked to not get involved. So it's been made clear that this is a House Stark and CTO issue, and also even now when when House Stark is hitting CTO, there's not too much we can do to defend ZTO from at least House Stark, because that would involve attacking an ally, which doesn't make sense, and um, and attacking Guardian even so, because then it puts House Stark in a weird situation where they defend Guardian by hitting us. Do they do this and that? So in this situation, it's in my opinion, it should be just House Stark and Carthago. But obviously it's a little more than that. But either way, I think it's their issue and their issue to resolve.
So one of the additional questions that I think needs to be kind of brought up here is, you said in the TFP statement in your declaration of neutrality that you were not approached by either side for mediation. So your attempts were I guess, unsolicited then?
Yes, I was told not to talk to them, and I still did it on my own behalf. So
Okay. Now, you've said third party involvement. You condemn third party involvement. Now, I know that has extended to protectorates. So, will that cover? Because, for example, it's been reported, now not in Ron because we don't report on the nano news, but in, for example, OCN, it has been reported that, where is it here? Some of the CTO prots, I would expect all of them, are militarizing. And so I guess I'd like to ask TFP's stance on prots getting involved. Will all prots be kind of told to sit out here, or are you going to let prots join in on behalf of Stark and Carthago? And
well,
then we'll get to Guardian, but let's stick with the prots first.
okay, sure. So in regards to the prots, I mean, it's still my opinion that I think it should be a purely House Stark and CTO issue. If the prots want to get involved, then either it should be no prots on either side, or any prots on either side, just to keep it consistent, not some prots from one group but then no prots on another group, kind of thing like that. So yeah,
Okay.
that's yeah.
Makes sense. It looks like, if we were to do prots, it looks like CTO's army would come in handy for them. um, what
Hey, you
what
don't
was the
back yourself
logic?
enough, Imperium is
Yeah.
mad, you never know. Pull up some solid
Um,
numbers.
Yeah, man, you can take them all on, right?
yeah. Oh, of course, 100%. I mean, it's only FSO, so we've got it, no problem. um, what was the thought process on leaving Guardian out of it? Now, I heard it mentioned that you said going after Guardian puts House Stark in a weird kind of position because it's their ally as well, and so if you go after them, then they're put in the same position that you're put in between House Stark and Carthago. So was it simply not wanting to put them in the weird position, or was it also part of the fact that it wasn't the entirety of Guardian, it was a select group of members, maybe not the fairest select group, but a select group nonetheless?
Yeah, I mean, another one of my opinions is that I'm not the biggest fan of a dog pile kind of thing, but um, I think having Guardian just with select members and with and I think I took a look briefly at the tiering beforehand. Um, I don't remember exactly what the members that are coming in are, but I think it's um from pure number standpoint, I think it's relatively
Well,
at
I can
least
pull up a
more even
tiering.
for us to get involved. Or sorry, it's more even numbers wise, so less inclined to get involved, I suppose.
Yes, let me see. So I'll Borg has something here, but it's always incredibly difficult to understand graphs. So this is with it being all of Guardian. So I would anticipate that it's this Carthago's tiering, the tiering difference is a bit different here, but it's House Stark advantaged through pretty much every tier, although in some it's only a bit. You okay, Borg. So Borg's is accurate here. Um, to be honest, I have no idea who is who.
I think CTO's in red because they have those
Yeah,
two
CTO's red.
spikes in the
Okay,
C30 range.
so yeah, they have numerical advantage in some of these areas, but it is actually a pretty close um fight across the tiers. At least it's closer than it would have been had Olf Guardian hopped in. So I guess then the question becomes your declaration of neutrality was I guess I'd like to call a little less than a declaration of neutrality and more like a declaration of don't intervene in these two's fight, considering that you also condemned third parties. Does that extend to if, for example, random alliance number 53 was to just say, hey, Carthago's getting hit pretty hard right now. Let's just go hit them for the fun of it. Does that condemnation of third parties extend to countering uh, parties that TFP considers a third party?
I guess that's one of mostly yes, but I guess I'll just put in at discretion or whatever. Um, but
Okay.
I mean the declaration of neutrality, I would say, was the main point of it was to declare neutrality uh, between it all, and that I guess to also mention that it should be just these two guys fighting, given that it's just their issue.
Okay. Makes sense. So I'm going to open it up to, I guess, any comments on the war in general from House Stark, TFP, Carthago. Is there anything that you guys feel hasn't been said that should be? Anything you feel has been misrepresented that you think needs to be fixed? Things like that. It's across the board. I mean, let's avoid the obvious disagreements here about valuation and whether or not CTO is at fault for an allegedly inaccurate valuation or things like that. Just to general facts on the war. Is there anything that you guys feel has kind of been missed in general?
I mean, not really that much. I didn't know whether or not the stats were going to go up on CTO, but I mean, obviously it's been mentioned that they were not milled and whatever and all that, and that we shouldn't bring in other parties per se, but we've tried to keep it as even as possible. Obviously, there's some statistical advantages in most or some categories, but that was just to even out the tiering a little bit because Obviously, if you look at the alliances, ours isn't tiered nearly as high as CTO. So it was more so just to even it out, and we've been trying to make adjustments if people ask them or for them to make it a bit more even.
Yes, I can. With the experience that I have, I can agree on that one. Ashwin, anything that you think's been missed?
I mean, I think everything's been covered. I mean, I'm not gonna try and get into to pick sides and everything, but or get into the semantics of the actual conflict. But um, I think everything's been generally covered. I wish there was a CTO someone here for equal representation, but
I wish I tried. I really did. I tried. Um, and I'm going to open it up to the listeners. Do you have any questions that we can either ask the CTO audience members or ask the House Stark or TFP representative while we are here? Any questions at all that need to be answered? Did House Stark have any idea of how much the shares were worth before Krampus gave the valuation?
We did not have really any idea of what shares were valued at before Krampus told us outright, because most sheets just or in general weren't updated whatsoever. So there's really no way of providing an accurate number. But when it was provided, that was essentially the only thing we had to work with as far as finding out how much we were owed.
Okay. Any other questions we have here? I'm hoping that Roberts will be able to make it tonight, but yes, for anyone that missed it, Carthago did ROH, recognize hostilities. I will post it again here because it seems like it has been missed. Oh, good. You're here, Roberts. Wonderful. Okay. With that, thank you to Starfuse and Ashwin both for hopping in tonight and for the Carthago text warriors in the Balkans. We appreciate all of you for your contributions to this area. One thing I will say that I think has been mentioned a couple of times is, for example, Carthago may not consider the CB valid in the sense that they don't believe that they owed House Stark what House Stark claimed was owed. But in terms of a war with a CB, and that has generated a fairly nice amount of drama, a solid one as far as those go. Because House Stark declared with like a fairly valid reason, whether or not it's correct, again, that's for debating between Carthago and House Stark. But the reason itself, the reasoning is valid, and it has caused some fairly solid engagement and interaction. So a lot of fun there. Thank you again, Starfuse and Ashwin. Any last comments that you'd like to make?
no, just thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I guess my last comment would really be that I mean, they keep talking about how they don't know where we got the valuation from for 8 bill, but it came from Krampus, so I don't know what they're talking about. But that's essentially my last piece on it, or whatever.
Blame Krampus. That's the new hashtag.
Always blame Krampus.
Yes. All right. Thank you guys. I'm going to drop you both back to the audience, and I will bring on Roberts. Roberts, you've been invited to speak. Unfortunately, I don't know how to accept people's requests. Oh, wait, here we go. Oh, no, I invited you now. Now you have to accept the invite. I don't know how this Discord stages are weird, man. Alrighty, Roberts, you're on the stage but muted.
What up?
How are you doing, Roberts?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm excited to begin talking with you about more or less a follow-up from engagement here, which would be you've gotten to see a small spike of engagement on the forums with these posts.
True. I can only get so erect. 4 solid posts back to back to back to back. It's like, damn. What did we do to get spoiled this week?
The greatest glory the forums have seen in a while. So to start on this, to introduce Roberts for those of you who don't who may not have read what this topic is going to be, Roberts has been talking and arguing in favor of the revival of the forums, the Politics and War forums, for a while here. And he's been speaking about their necessity to the game and things like that. So, Roberts, can you give us some background on how the forums appear to have gotten to the point that they are at now?
All right, that's kind of a long-winded answer. So I'm going to do it in very brief answer. I'm going to try to keep it brief.
You're welcome to ramble. That's what radio shows are for.
For those of you that don't know, the majority, I would say, of PNW players, or at least a plurality of PNW players, came from a game called Cyber Nations. Cyber Nations, the forum was pretty active, but as the game died off, it died with it. But the forums were kind of this place of formal posting. I said a plurality because I don't know if majority is true anymore. But the forums, and that carried over into PNW is the point I'm trying to make. So the forums are the place where you post your serious business. You know what I mean? You go on IRC and now Discord or Slack if you're TKR to chit chat and shit post. But I think that over time, Discord has kind of eaten a little bit of that forum audience where one, people are getting more people than ever are on Discord, which is kind of an important piece to consider. So where we used to have IRC or Slack or whatever, and it was like a bonus point to be on IRC, right? But really most alliances were just a forum, or if they may not have even had a forum, it would just be like the alliance and people would communicate through in-game messaging. Now that alliances are 100% on Discord, it has kind of pulled forums away from being, I guess, the center of politics and chat and like the serious business of what goes on. Because like, why would we go on the PNW forums if I can just ping Davith directly in the Balkans and tell him that he's bad at FA? You know what I mean? So But the reason that I think they're important to circle back to and not drop out completely is I think we've seen over the course of the last, like since MPO's last time, where the forums have kind of gotten a little quieter, where we used to have, um, like NPO would post a thread, Partisan would respond to it, and then he'd post his own counter thread. Both of them would have 20 pages worth of, 1,000-word essay replies. Now we have kind of, people may or may not post a declaration of war. They may or may not post a recognition of hostilities. May or may not. Honestly, most treaties I think don't get posted anymore, which I hope changes because I think the contractual obligations and like arguments of that nature are kind of add a layer of interestingness to the game. But to circle back to why they're important, the politics piece of this game revolves around all of us kind of. I keep using the word role play, and I think people misconstrue that into a much nerdier thought than what I'm trying to say when I say role play. But this game, the politics revolve around all of us pretending to be some form of leader of it. We don't really do national role, like nation role play too much, but like alliance role play we do a lot of. Like if I'm the FA head of TKR, I did and would do a lot of role play as the representative of TKR, for example. So in that context, the role play remains important, and it remains the driving piece of any kind of interesting story in PNW. What keeps us engaged, what keeps us paying attention is that narrative, that story, that role play. And on Discord, it's too fast paced, it's too short short of a, what am I trying to say, message size, I guess, to really get that in-depth role play feel that you can get with a good wall of text on the forums. You know what I mean? Like it's like Twitter versus a book.
Yeah, and it also moves a bit too quickly. For example, when the war first kicked off, House Stark and Carthago, there was Piggy was in here arguing back and forth with, like Hobbs. Ataxia was here briefly, Starfuse, about the validity of this valuation and all of that, but it gets buried so quickly in the Balkans that even message size is really it's the speed of how many messages come in that within 15 minutes after the conversation ends, no one else can see it because it's gone.
Mm-hmm. And somebody, I think they're responding to what you're saying. Discord has a slow mode. That is true, but it really has little to do with any one individual other than maybe me. I've been told I type in too many lines and I should shorten it into a paragraph. But most of the issue comes from so many people responding separately, not necessarily that not necessarily that one person is spamming too much. So like, even this conversation can be a good example. You know what I mean? Try to scroll up to where this radio show started. You know what I mean? In the Balkans.
Yeah.
It's going to take you like a solid 10, 15 minutes to probably find if you don't know where it started already. You know what I mean? Because you're parsing through Davith and Prefontaine arguing about random shit, people responding to shit on the radio with no context in the actual text. Yeah, and by the time you find it, there'll be 400 more messages on the bottom side. So Discord is not necessarily the best place for politics to happen in that way.
It should also be mentioned that slow modes, even like a 5-second slow mode, if you're somebody that, like for example, I'm with you there, Roberts. I don't write in blocks of text. I write in like 30 smaller messages. If that's how you write, or you're also having a bit more of a smaller conversation, it can actually, even a 5 second slow mo can kill the interest in the conversation, because you have a point that you're trying to get across and you can't communicate quickly enough to get it out there.
Hmm.
Which let's see. I did actually write a few questions to ask you, Roberts. Why do you think that they've sunk to this level? Now, obviously, part of it comes from what you were saying about Discord has replaced it because it's easier. Is that just the reason that the forums have kind of slowed down, or is there more than just Discord's convenience?
Um, I think I think that generally speaking, we lost a good chunk of older players that tended to wax philosophical, I guess would be the term, from NPOs last time. I think we lost a lot of players in general on both sides of that war that just never returned to the game, or some of them have, like Burrohan or Sketchy, are now kind of returning and rejoining politics. And I think that shows because Sketchy is one of the people who's constantly posting on the forums. But I think a piece of it was that we lost some of the people that really carried the community in that regard. And then I think another piece of it is just kind of in the age of mini spheres or whatever you want to call it, where you don't have two massive coalitions on either side. I think that level of, I call it Rose FA, of being a more quiet group that doesn't really make a lot of announcements and doesn't really jump into the conversation without being prompted, is, I think a lot of people are starting or have adopted that. And one, I don't think it really works. It doesn't really work for Rose. They kind of get rolled as much as anybody else. And two, it's not interesting. It's not interesting for the people being quiet, and it's not interesting for the people that are sitting in silence waiting for, you know what I'm saying, somebody to say stuff.
Yeah.
I personally think.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Basically just a
in a world
cultural
where,
thing.
yeah, but in a world where everyone is like that, eventually it becomes the default way, because anyone that begins posting actively like that, you stick out like the sore thumb and you become a target.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally what Prefontaine just replied with as well.
Oh,
So
there we go.
there are a lot of
Oh.
people that think like that, and in a lot of ways that is true, and I agree with that. But in a lot of ways, I think that if you're proactive and actually decent at politicking and diplomacy, then it can serve to your benefit in a lot of ways that people don't see right off the bat. For example, ARG FA, we basically don't do FA, but because of our public presence and our culture, I guess, our known culture, it creates a space where people feel comfortable coming to us with one, sensitive stuff. So we literally get fed intel just by existing, not even participating in politics. So putting on that friendly public face makes people feel comfortable with you to share stuff like that. Two, it gives us a certain I don't want to use the word mystique because I feel like people will make fun of me and tell me ARG's not that important. But I feel like ARG does have a certain mystique of, like, you do whatever you want, you raid people, nuke people, whatever, with no care. So public FA and putting on that image putting your name out there seems very straightforward to me as a basic part of FA and diplomacy. So it's really interesting because it's just like real life sales. You know what I mean? If you just sit there and
Yeah.
wait, it's going to be a lot harder for you to, make things happen, meet your sales goal.
Absolutely.
So it's just kind of the quiet FA style really relies on like not being noticed, and it doesn't even, like I said, it doesn't pan out for rows because they're too big. And then the people that it might pan out for, like you could use House Stark as an example. House Stark has gone semi unnoticed for the past like 4 years, and it's just like, did that serve them well? Because they don't have a C30 plus tier, really. I mean, like they're not like an upper tier alliance, so they didn't
Yeah.
use that obscurity to grow themselves into whales. They didn't use that obscurity to become politically dominant. It's not until they've really come out of their shell in the last few months that House Stark has even been like semi-relevant. You know what I'm saying?
I concur
So
with that. Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of proactive diplomacy.
Whereas, it's an overused example, but like, for example, KT is always stirring the pot. And so you could argue they're always somewhat relevant because, everyone will mill up in response to a KT mill up because no one wants to get hit by KT.
Hmm.
Just fair. Now here's one that I think is important because I don't believe that you're arguing just for forum activity. You're also arguing for kind of quality, which is why I ask, and I think the answer is, I already know the answer. Do you support or not support AI written or specifically Chat GPT posts?
So I'll be honest, the answer is yes. So all the examples that people have given of this, so like the treaty that got posted, the peace treaty that got written by ChatGPT, I've been informed that that turned into a whole peace conference basically, where both sides had a great time editing whatever ChatGPT spat out, and making it make sense for PNW, and everybody had a good time. And when it got posted, I was out of the loop at the time, so I didn't even know it was a AI written thing. I just thought it was something somebody wrote up. I commented, I was like, wow, this looks great. I wish we'd have more forum posts like this. So I mean, if on the one hand, as long as people are still engaging with it and not just like if you get like a bot to just post random trash on the forums, I think you kind of get that answer in itself, because we have a few threads like this. People that use Chat GPT need to be stopped that Kills Bob posted, and then he posted like 2 paragraphs that Chat GPT spat out for him. Like, it's just kind of like an uninteresting thread. It got a couple replies, but like, you know what I'm saying? But it's still content and people have fun with it. So, and it's on the forums. I'm a big believer that content kind of begets content in a certain way. You kind of need to make sure the content's positive, but yeah, pretty much content begets content. So if people want to use AI generated stuff, as long as it's engaging and they've engaged with it, I don't see as much of a
Okay.
problem with it as other people do.
Okay. I think the argument relating it has been that for some people, when you can tell that it kind of reads like an AI post,
Hmm.
you just stop bothering to read it. Like that was the one that I saw. There was one, I don't remember whose it was. I think it was Velyni's, one of his recent ones. I don't remember what it was for, but it was AI written, and I was looking through it, and I could tell it was a Chat GPT one, and I was just like, I'm not. I'm not gonna bother. Because for some of that, it when you can tell off the bat. Now, granted, if you're like in your situation where you read it and it had you had no idea, and it was and it wasn't just no idea, but it was like people had fun and enjoyed making it. Then that's fair enough. But for like the announcements, or that kind of stuff, for me on my end, I'd like to see something creatively generated versus the AI. That's a personal preference, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'd rather see something that a person wrote than an AI generated. But I mean, like, I use Chat GPT all the time, so I know that it's very rare to get an AI to spit out something that you can copy and paste and actually use and have it make sense. I don't know. Actually, I take that back because I work with a lot of people in real life who their emails read like they're just AI generated and like half don't even understand what's going on. So either way, who knows? But
Yeah. And then you've probably touched on this in your past responses, but why do you view the forums as such an integral part of politics and war? Why are they such an important issue? This is what you've chosen to sound off on out of anything else.
so basically, I kind of touched on this already, but basically, forums are kind of the heart of where like the heart of your nation sim genre. We've tried, and I've played these games for too damn long, and at this point, I play them for fun when I'm bored at work. But like I've been playing these games for a while. Like nation sims thrive when you give them a space to be longer form content. And I mean, obviously the forums are an optional space. So if you don't feel like reading something, you don't have to. But giving a space where the community can come together and feel like they have, you know, the time where it's not, a speed rush to type the funniest quip on Balkans or, yeah, I mean, get a sick burn in for people to react with emojis. And on the flip side, it gives them space to fully write out their point, customize it with images. You know, it's a word text editor, a little bit more user friendly than Discord. So, like, bold, italic, underline, font size, all that good stuff that you can edit, which you can do on Discord too, but it's just a little bit easier on the forums, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I think it just gives a creative space for the heart of the game to kind of come out, which is that this is, at the end of the day, a text-based game, and we just like we kind of prove it with our radio show. There's like 1,000 people in this Discord server, and there's only 36 listening in the audience. So you know what I mean? Even the
Yes.
worst forum post will usually get a couple hundred views. So
Yes.
the point is, it reaches the whole audience of the game. This is a text-based game at the end of the day, and the forums is just kind of the best medium that I think that I have seen. Playing these, not only PNW but like Cybernations, Diplomacy and Strife, Project Terra, Lunar Wars. Shout out Prefontaine. I mean, like all these nation sim games, nation states. The forums have just kind of been that heart of the game, just because it's text based. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess diverging from the questions list here, you would then kind of agree that although you'd rather not see the forums completely overrun by them, allowing the kind of micro nano posts, and again, not to an absurd level where every necessarily like every small bit of drama warrants a new post, but where drama between alliances, macro level like this, micro level, or that kind of stuff, you would prefer to see all of it, not just macro level.
I unironically think every single thing. If you think it's important enough to say in the Balkans, I would support wholeheartedly it becoming a forum post. Like I am
Okay.
100% fine with that. If it's
So
dumb micro drama, even like what I'm saying,
yeah,
let's use an example. Today is Ripper's, it's not really, but example. Today is Ripper's birthday. Ripper is a beloved community member, far reaches far outside of just ARG or people he's been in an alliance with. Everybody loves Ripper for the most part. So like we would slap a forum post up saying, "Hey, today's Ripper's birthday." You know what I mean? And some thematic piratey sounding text with it. You know what I mean? Like stuff as simple as that. It just adds flavor. It adds character to the game.
yes.
I want to clarify, it's not really Ripper's birthday. I was just using that as an example.
So would you then agree that perhaps it would be the best for everybody's sanity that the alliance announcements was potentially segmented into like macros and non-macros? And I mean, of course, the definition would be subjective, but limit alliance announcements currently to the major point, and then the other set would just be for all this micro nano stuff that people could look at as they please.
You mean like separate alliance affairs forums?
More or less, just because so many people use, like, for example, we have it in the staff room where it'll pull all the alliance announcements, the forum posts, so that then we can look at them. If you have all the nano stuff going in there too, it's going to be hard for people to want to filter through that to find the actually important posts.
I mean, I don't know. Like back in the day, and I've linked it a few times in the Balkans. You can even look at the P&W forums from back in like 2016, 17, 15. But I've linked like the old Cybernation forums from back in like 2009. I mean, there was like at least a page full of threads per day going up. I mean, it's just I hear what you're saying, but I think if the forums ever got to that point of usage, people would just adapt and kind of, oh, this post comes from, Alan. I'm not going to read it. This
Fair.
post came from Evil Piggy Fufu. That's the leader of Carthago. I'm definitely going to read that one. Yeah, I mean, people will filter by themselves. It's just kind of a. I agree with you. If like starting today, everybody posted every thought on the forums, people would probably be like, "What in the hell?" and get overwhelmed. But I
Yeah.
think it would very quickly be a self-solving problem. And also, Prefontaine brought up a good point too that I also wanted to touch on
Go
was
for it.
posting on the forums helps engage members instead of just leaders or FA people, which I think is another. I think that's a good point that I really didn't consider too. Is every time you, I'm not trying to pick on Alan. I was just using you. I got the forums open, so I saw his name. But every time you post a forum thread, it's publicly accessible to any member of any alliance. I mean, literally anybody that visits the PNW forums. I don't even think you need an account to view alliance affairs. Although you might. But whereas on Discord, like we said, stuff gets lost in the Balkans. A lot of members, like I've been in recently, I kind of alliance hopped a little bit. So I was in TKR. I had my own micro. I was in Rose for a little bit. I talked with the syndicate about potentially joining, but Wanda ultimately kind of turned me off of that.
Yes.
So I mean, I've been, and I've talked with a lot more people about joining their alliance as well, and just seeing where I kind of fit in before I landed ultimately back in ARC. But the vast majority of people like hate, either don't want to be in the Balkans and don't want to read it, or are just actively not in Ron, like not in the server at all. So this is it really is kind of a circle jerk when you get down to it, of the same maybe like 200 or less people that are hyper active and engaged with what's going on in the game. And even then, a lot of FA people won't come in the Balkans either, so the forums
Yeah,
give
that's
them
fair.
better space.
It does. You've tried to resolve some of that with debate floor, but obviously you're only going to be so successful given
Yeah, I
it's
think
still
the
through
debate floor
Discord.
is a good little addition, but it's not a replacement. But it is a good little spot to kind of filter some of the noise. I think it's going good so far.
It has been, actually. It's a nice place to get opinions from people. Just to answer the question stuff in the chat, I'm pretty sure he was in Carthago Borg at some point, but he might not have been, and we're all just having a collective Mandela effect.
Are you asking me?
No. I was just answering something from the chat. So the forums, they're necessary to continue, I mean, general member engagement, but also to ensure that kind of long form politics and politics in general stays active and doesn't dissolve into that culture of quiet mush that we see from Rose and other alliances. Would that be accurate?
Say that one more time.
The forums, they're necessary for both member engagement and, reading enemy posts. And, like, again, a great example here would be the Carthago ROH and the House Stark DOW. Both of those are, laden with facts and information there directly related to their political stances. So members can engage in that. But back to the actual point. So forums allow members to engage with both their own leaders' ideologies and the opposition's. And then it also kind of helps prevent the quiet culture of, for example, Rose.
Yes.
Okay.
And I also do kind of want to just touch on, I think Rose has been doing better. Not the best, but I think they're doing a lot better. They've moved a little bit away from their policy of absolute silence. So kudos for
Okay.
progress.
Fair enough. So do you think that the forums will continue to kind of be on a slump, or do you think that they will be able to come out of the current problem and get back to what you envision them being?
I mean, it's going to take work to get back to the question also kind of asks, do we even have enough active players to get the forums back to what they once were? And I truly don't know the answer to that. But as the forums get used more people will use the forums. So it kind of depends on if people buy into it, if people, and it's got to be an effort from multiple sections of the community. Like it can't just be, just TKR, Rose, and Syndicate. It can't just be TFP and their sphere as they attack each other. Like, it has to come from all sections. It has to be a community effort to make the community better, if that makes sense. Kind of like
Yes.
addressing littering in real life. No one
Yeah.
group or person can really handle it. It's got to be a cultural shift. But yeah, I do believe we'll get back there. I already kind of see it happening even before this stuff with TFP and all that. Like, this last global war did pretty good with forum posts comparatively to other global wars. So, doing all right. Even got our little yearly anti-ARG coalition forum post. So
Yes.
we haven't had one of those in a long time. So I was pretty proud of that one.
What do you what kind of path do you see forward to get this revival established?
It's honestly, I don't know. I mean, my piece of it is, being an ARG, I have a pretty wide canvas to work with in terms of thematic posts. So, from my perspective, just I'm going to do my part. Replying is another important piece to keeping the forums active. Like, we can make posts, but people get lazy and they just upvote it or do the laughing emoji or downvote it and then log out. Like, replies are so important, even if they're just short. Like, I thought this post was well written. I feel like I sound like a college professor, but replies are so important because it keeps that content flowing of, now this forum post that was an announcement has become a community conversation. And that's when they'll really start kicking in, is when threads become conversations. People will start to get engaged and hopefully it'll snowball.
It seems like it has the potential to.
You never know.
I guess the last thing to really go over here is anything else that you would like to bring up or discuss. Is there anything, forums first of all, but if nothing else relating to the forums, anything otherwise that you feel needs to be brought up and spoken about?
Yes. Is Schwinn still in the audience? Okay, this is directly directed at Schwinn. Guardian has no treaty obligations to you and vice versa. You do not have any non-aggression pact with them that you do with Carthago or House Stark. They are a random third party as far as you guys are concerned, hitting one of your direct allies. I fully believe that you guys should counter Guardian and clap them and make them regret coming after whatever your sphere is called. I fully believe in the TFP beating Guardian
Stirring
train.
the pot. Stirring the pot, huh?
Yes.
Florida is too scary. Well, rest in peace.
TFP has to destroy Guardian. You wouldn't.
Why do they?
If
Why
Florida
do they
countered,
have to?
If Florida countered, I would personally argue that would be very unjustified because Guardian was the aggressor. So there's no legal basis, although you never know. That's a risk you take. They could counter anyway. But be the change you want to see. Okay, all right, I feel that. I will make a post on the forums about how TFP should hit Guardian.
You got called out on the carpet for that one.
True.
All right. And you know what, Roberts? I'll make sure to take your advice, and I will write, no matter what you post, I will write on there, this is a very well written post.
Thank
this
you
way
so
we can
much.
get that conversation rolling.
I appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It's always nice to have people on that are working on, causes, things beyond just the basic number go up, number go down.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Anything else, or are we good?
I don't have anything else other than just continued
Alrighty.
trolling of Schwinn.
Well, I'll leave you to harass him in the Balkans. Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, it's fun.
And let's go ahead and are you available? Ironically, at the exact time that I told you you'd be needed. He is awesome. That was so completely unintentional, but perfectly planned. Alrighty. Let's see if the mic works for Prefontaine. One second. Alrighty, you take your time. For those of you wondering what we will be interviewing Prefontaine about, it's going to be the consumption changes, the proposed consumption changes, dev work, all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, no, this segment's totally the boring one.
Totally. Well, after this, you get to have Velyni come in and just throw his hot takes around. But this one I think is important because we have to understand that if the dev team flunks these changes, we are all utterly screwed. So either we all listen to the upcoming changes and give feedback and take the reins into our hands, or we all end up without food 15 days after the changes are implemented. All right, thank you, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So honestly, the food changes, I'm really not worried about. Sure, if we have an NPO's last time that lasts 6 months and is pure nuclear winter that time, then I might be a little worried. But increasing even 4 times the consumption rate isn't going to put a dent in food. So I really don't have a concern of it, at least the food aspect of it. There's some concern on other fronts. There are some changes from the original post itself that are currently being talked about based on feedback and some other things. A ball got dropped somewhere along the way. It was originally being carried, and that involves the current inactive nations that aren't following the what's supposed to happen when you go inactive and the deletion schedule that occurs. So the reason that's not happening is clearly intentional based on the coding from what Village said. So we're waiting for Alex to respond before we actually return that and thus purge all the inactive nations that should have been purged. And a lot of these nations are stuff that benefited from RPC. So a lot of these small nations that just continually grew resources while inactive. We did make that change to make it so that they had to stay active for a period of time for RPC to be functioning, but that really didn't put a dent in it because nations weren't deleting like they were supposed to, and that's where the ball got dropped. Is we stopped worrying about the inactive nations after that, thinking that the fix had occurred, but there was still a shit ton of resources left in those nations that never got pruned out of the game.
That makes sense. So do you, and more than you, but I guess it would expand to from you to the dev team, consider food the most important of your areas right now, or is it resources as a whole?
It started with food. Food has the biggest disparity in terms of production versus consumption. It gets used way less than it's being pumped out, and a large portion of that comes from it being created more by larger nations. I forget the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure during summer production values, in my nation when I still had infrastructure and stuff, I was able to make like 150K food per day. And that's only at city 44. So we have a lot more nations in higher tiered city counts that are able to have a little bit extra infrastructure to use those improvement slots for food, because it is the most profitable raw resource as you get up there. So more and more people are making it, but less people are using it because the consumption rates are virtually non-existent. The only time food doesn't necessarily go up is when a prolonged nuclear winter happens.
Makes sense. So let's actually go ahead and review some of these proposed changes. Now, you mentioned before we get to that, it was stated that these are not it when it comes to consumption changes, but you guys, these are your starting plans, and from there, once you see how this pans out, then there might be additional changes down the line to further tweak consumption. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a pool of ideas basically. The sink that works the best in the game is money. Money gets burned for infrastructure in cities in the largest capacity, and it's like if you had to buy one of the city improvements, every city basically. So that's the equivalent to the food being used for those projects versus money being used for cities and infrastructure. You need it every single city upgrade, and that's really what you're generally working towards after you build a city and build the infrastructure in it. You're generally saving up for your next city and maybe a project along the way if you have a big project to plan for in that city range. But the war sink, the part of the reason we want to wait on doing other resource, especially refined resource changes, is a lot of wars are relatively over quickly in terms of units and fighting back. So if there was a back and forth or prolonged unit-based warfare before missile and nuke turreting happens, those would see more steel, aluminum, gas, and ammo being used, predominantly steel and aluminum, because already the winners are still using gas and ammo to, do naval attacks, to do airstrikes, whatever they're doing to grind down the infrastructure.
And so the hope is that military changes will pair with this to help utilize those resources more, correct?
To continue with the metaphor, to unclog the sink, so to speak, to let the sink be used a little more freely. The problem with the war change is it's really dependent on if someone wants to fight back. It gives them the opportunity. It doesn't require them to. So they can continue with the meta of, okay, we got knocked down in turn one, let's save our money for next war and just missile and nuke turret them. It absolutely can happen. It's up to the players. But the big thing is now the players have an option to rebuild and try to come out together in a unified counterattack, but they very well might not. And if that happens, then we need to look at how are we going to increase the usage for refined resources, some sort of sink. Maybe there becomes, general upkeep costs, like soldiers cost some food. Maybe tanks are going to cost a small amount of steel to keep operational for a period of time. Maybe they're going to cost gas because you have to keep them moved around. These are just some things that are on the drawing board, so to speak, but not all need to happen at first. There's going to necessarily, yes, soldiers do take food. They eat more at war. So we don't want to roll everything out at once because we do have a war change coming. I think Village is in like the final throes of both the econ and war changes. I don't know if they've gone to test server yet, but we're kind of, like I said, waiting for Alex to give the okay to flip the switch on the nation deletion function that was temporarily disabled. And we're still, some of the war changes include updates from 2020. So we want to get everything out that needs to come out, see how that affects resources if wars actually become a little bit more back and forth and start using a bit more of the war resources. And if they don't, how do we make a balance between raws and refined and find, some sort of improved sink? You don't want the faucet on too hard and the sink not working well enough, because then you get oversaturation and value drops. And sure, someone will go stop producing steel if steel hits the tank and start making aluminum or something to that effect. But if all the resources are on a steady decline, that's a problem. And that's what we're trying to avoid, because everything's kind of on a decline.
Yes. It's at one of the market index overall that you guys have within the game is at one of the lowest rates it's been at within the last few years. So makes sense that now is when we are working on correction. The power plant. So first of all, you saw obviously the polls in the PNW News channel. By how large a margin were you guys looking at, like a rejection? For example, just a simple majority, and then you were thinking, oh, well, we should probably not look at that, or something to the extent of like the raw resource refinement, which had the vast majority of people voting against that.
Wasn't it the food bonus going away?
Yeah, it was the food bonus, removing the food bonus.
Yes. So honestly, I like seeing the feedback, but certain things we're a little less concerned on the feedback on, like the general upvotes, downvotes. We want to see responses and reasons behind it, because with updates like these, especially, you're creating things in some ways that are going to cost more. So generally, people don't like that. Everyone, for the most part, has nuclear power at once they reach a certain threshold. So telling everyone the cost of their nuclear power plants are basically doubling, they're going to be like, boo, we don't like that. So again, feedback on things like this is a little less. There's no set number to answer that direct question. There's no ratio we're looking for.
Okay.
Seeing the huge disparity on the bonuses for food makes us go, well, if we're going to do one food option or the other versus both, we're going to probably go with the consumption versus the lack of production. So, we'll keep that production one in the back pocket if food continues to skyrocket in terms of its production versus consumption, and then we'll need to scale back the production of it too. So, and that's probably what's going to be happening. Like I said, we're kind of waiting to see what the results are from the purge, if it does happen. So we might, I think the current list of what we're actually looking at, if the purge goes as expected, is power plant increase, the food consumption rate increase, and that might be it right now. The others can kind of sit on the back burner and see if they're actually needed.
The refinement increases and the resources used for cities would be held off?
Most likely. Just because we're, like I said, food was the original smoking gun, so to speak.
And if the others continue to become a problem, then you'll throw these off the back burner and implement them.
Yeah, some of them might already be coded, so they could just be effectively the switch could be flipped, and they'll be good to go. And even if they're not, in general, these are relatively easy updates to implement.
Yes, that was the nice aspect of these, from what I was told. Have you guys looked at, to go more abstract? I know a lot of people have mentioned land and the concern of it being really only useful for food. The other useful aspect it has, is related to like disease and population density, but the primary use of land is increased food production. Have you guys looked at any potential changes to use of that, looked at additional improvements in cities, things like that?
The short answer is yes, but it's not anything concrete. I don't know how many years ago now it was, but Alex had this idea for a large overhaul to the nation's setup in a way. So a lot of those things that don't mean anything, like approval rating and that sort of stuff would actually have a meaning. There was an idea to expand improvements to include 2 new categories that would kind of, for those familiar with Civ, the easiest way to explain it, kind of have your culture, your religion, stuff to have other areas of your nation that would have an actual meaningful impact. So there might be a culture tab on improvements, but this is, like I said, something long ago that it was an Alex brainchild that he didn't really seem to want to run with at all. So I have no idea if he has done any work on that. He hasn't talked to me about it, so I doubt it. But there's been, every time I've brought up the idea for land in terms of the ability to destroy it, I get yelled out of the room. So I don't think there's any change coming to land, really.
And what about, I guess, making it relevant to other resources would be useful for diverting from food production, but would be problematic in that you're kind of, you're stuck with all these mandates of, for example, recently you guys were trying to boost other tiers so that whale tier isn't like the sole focus of the game. And so anything that changes land, for example, to have an effect on raws will maybe help with food, but boost the whales.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Whales are the nations that have the improvements to spare to really go towards refinement and mass raw production. The general flow of the game, if you're not going to go anything raid based early, is early on you should be getting very low levels of commerce in terms of like the supermarkets and things like that, and get some raw resource production and use those to sell in the market to make some additional money. As you get larger, you should be focusing on an infrastructure level that lets you have a full commerce build, whether that's the 100% or as you expand into projects, the 115 or 125%, whatever the exact numbers are for the thresholds. But those should be the goals in terms of income. And then you supplement that where you can, whether you keep a large standing military or not, on either refinement or raw production. So as you continue to grow, you have more flexibility on if you're going to venture into raw production, and creating so that land provides a bonus on raw production as well will only help large nations.
Yes. You guys have it tough on the dev team, don't you?
I refer to my role as the hate sponge of the game.
Yeah. That's what I think you guys get shortchanged is um it's difficult to reach out to everybody. It's hard to survey the game and get all those opinions. And then you're also limited on the back end by whatever Alex will actually approve. There might be something that 95% of the game says we'd love to have this edition. And if Alex says no, well, then, dev teams who gets the hate for it.
Yeah, but we're way better off than we used to be. So I've been doing this for I don't know how many years now. In an official capacity for like 3. But before that, I mean, all the way back to when I was helping lead Guardian in the beginnings of this game, I was still working with Alex trying to get content for the game. But in an official capacity, the way updates used to happen, and when I say used to, I mean you look at how treasures were rolled out. That was a fever dream of Alex overnight. So like almost the same with baseball. And so a lot of these things really were, oh, that's a good idea. I happened to be here, saw a good idea, liked it, ran with it. And rather than anything with, thought out consequences, it just got pushed live. So we kind of, there was a lot of hatred when I first started doing this, both because I was a controversial player and because I was still figuring out how to do this, and the game had no real trust in terms of how stuff was coming out. So we have a relatively structured system of we brainstorm ideas, we put together some of what we want, and I eventually make a decision on what we're putting to the public section, because otherwise we'd just end up talking in circles for months in the dev channels, because it's a room full of people who don't necessarily agree with each other. So it's a good thing because you get different points of view, but someone needs to eventually go, okay, we're taking this public and see what happens. And that's what my role has been, in being that public face of dealing with the people who at first just absolutely didn't trust it, didn't like me, and said, "Oh, nothing changes. We just push through whatever we want." Well, we've learned, we've grown, and we've also started shutting down some of the absolute shitheads that like to post in the forums and just try to make it seem like we're a bunch of assholes. But we do listen to the feedback. We do make changes. We don't just force things through. Occasionally we might have to, because it's something Alex wants. But the system we currently have is far superior to anything that's been in the past. And that's not to say that people who are former members of the dev team that have been removed or left weren't useful and good at what they were doing. It was just, we're in a much better spot now because I've gotten better at what I'm doing. And we've kind of, I think, built some trust up with the community, at least, that we are actually listening and we are actually making changes that the community generally wants. You're never going to get everyone on the same ship, but we're working with people rather than just doing what we want. We never really were just doing what we want, but I think it's accepted now that that is the case. But we still get plenty of hate because we're on the forums. Like Robert said, we're there for everyone to see. Anyone who wants to come and give some feedback can do it. And I don't think I take the bait too much anymore. I just kind of hide bullshit posts that aren't constructive. If you're an asshole, but at least constructive about it, I'll leave the post in, no problem. But if you're just being an asshole, I'm going to hide the post these days.
One of the questions from the audience was perks. That is not with this update, but that is a future thing, correct? So the war update and the resource adjustment is what's being worked on now, and then perks after that.
Yeah, so what is likely to happen is war changes, followed by econ changes, followed by projects sprinkled in somewhere. Again, projects really don't take a lot of time for the most part. I think one or two might have in the history, but Alex wanted some new projects to throw in the game for whatever reason, so we're throwing some new projects in the game. But after all that, the focus, from what I understand, is supposed to be perks. It's kind of why I'm still around in the capacity I am, because that's been my basically pitch since probably like 2015 at this point. But it's something I've been trying to get into this game for a long time. We'll see how this iteration goes, but that'll be the team's focus going forward.
And you I'm not going to ask for like specific timeline, but generally, do you anticipate these updates between, especially, I would say especially perks, stretching into next year?
So originally, Village was doing the bulk of the coding for a lot of the things. And when we first pitched the war changes, I think it was back in January or February, and the timetable we had then didn't account for Village to become completely swamped with what he was doing, and Alex really not to be coding, because Village is kind of changing the coding for the system. For those unfamiliar, we joke around about a thing called cheapy code, where it was this tangled web of inefficiency when it was first created. So that's kind of being fixed whenever we bring out module overhauls, and the big one was the war system. So that ended up needing more time, and also Village is going insane with school, so his priority became that, obviously. We were originally supposed to have the war module done probably end of March. Perks were supposed to be out for testing by summer. Obviously, we're nowhere near that. My hope is that we can get some sort of working game plan down by the end of the summer, And by the end of the fall, there's something to go live. That, again, depends on two things. If Village gets completely swamped as soon as he goes back to school in fall, and as Zig pointed out, Alex's commitment to pay attention to the game being legit. So I don't mind talking a little bit about that publicly. I've been a critic of him for a long time when it comes to this sort of thing. There's been multiple years where it's been, as soon as I finish with classes, I'm going to be working more on politics more. Or, now that I'm free come June, I'm going to be putting 40 hours a week into the game, or whatever the promises have been each year. And each year there's been something that's come up that's taken it away in some regards. So basically what I and Alex have talked about was, so him wanting to come back to the game is largely going to be taking over the role that I have created. He's going to be managing the content. He is going to be interacting with the community. He is going to be basically doing the things that I have been doing this last year. So where we end this summer, we've got a time to kind of get back in and reevaluate how things have gone. Once that happens, I have one of two plans with some of the other staff that we're kind of just waiting to see how the summer goes. So I don't really want to talk about what the hypotheticals are because they might not be needed. So that's where that really stands. And the timeline, like I said, I'm sticking around specifically for perks. Once that's done, I don't know if it's going to be full-time Alex show and no me or what's going to happen. But so my goal for perks is something workable by the end of the summer. And then however it gets coded out, I would hope in the fall.
So it would be reasonable to say, based off of what Zig said about Village, saying the war update is about ready to go, that we could see the war update by the end of the month, at least in test servers. And then by the end of, say, July, August, the econ changes plus at least start seeing some of those projects, if not getting most of them that you mentioned that Alex required. And then internally, you guys will be hammering out what perks should look like.
Yeah, the war update, as far as I know, should be ready to go this coming week in terms of going to the test server. I think the only thing it's waiting on is the final touches on the missile nuke VDS Iron Dome update and spies being able to have a 25% chance at getting another missile when they do a spy attack against missiles. I think those are like the last little tidbits to sprinkle in. But once those are in, it should be ready to go live. And those updates specifically are, like I said, there were some from 2020. Those are ones from 2020.
Okay. And then you guys are, test server tournament and all that will be announced whenever that pops up. Okay. What else was mentioned, if anything, here? Okay, so assuming that Alex takes your role, and I know, again, you mentioned hypotheticals, you don't want to get too far down the road there. Do you see yourself just jumping ship, moving to a different part of the game?
I'll probably put my nation into vacation mode in the admin alliance. And I might do some small bit of consulting here and there. But if Alex steps up and becomes active, you'll probably see me not around anymore.
Okay. Is that your own wish or something that you think could be forced?
No, I mean, he can't. I mean, yes, he could delete my nation and ban me from everything, but he's not going to force me out. It's more of a, there's no sense in him doing the role that I'm doing and me doing it, but him getting to overrule anything he wants to. It's too many cooks in the kitchen sort of scenario. It's just if he wants to do
Yeah.
the job I've been doing, he's the boss, like it's his role to do. And
Yeah.
I'm only around to make sure kind of someone's doing this work. I've been in this sort of a community since 2006, 2007. So I've been playing these games a long time. So I do give a bit of a shit about the people that play them. I have a lot of friends that I've had for a long time. So I try to keep the game going. But if someone's going to come up and keep the game going as the owner of it, more power to them. I'd be happy to see them succeed.
Sounds good. Is there anything else that we did not talk about tonight that you feel should be reviewed? That could be mechanics, that could be upcoming stuff, it could be something that we completely did not talk about. Is there anything that you would like to bring up?
So a lot of people like to blame mechanics on certain things. I've played these games where the game thrived even though the mechanics were absolute dog shit. There's a joint relationship between the people that work on the game and the people that play the game. I mentioned it a little bit with the war system overhaul. We're giving the players the option to fight back. If they choose not to, that's on them. Just like with the forums, there's this area that they can choose to use. There's this delicate balance between players and the people running the game, that some problems can be solved by the players, some problems can be solved by changing the content of the game. But ultimately, it's collaborative. So even if I'm not the person in charge of the design team, work with whomever that is. It'll be Alex. So work with Alex. If that's the case, give him a chance, give him a shot, and understand that not all problems can be solved with mechanics. You've got to be able to, take advantage of the game. Sometimes like what I did as a player wasn't the best move in terms of trying to win the game, but it was the best thing to do for the health of the game. So you need people that are in charge of the community that focus on the health aspect of the game too. Like you don't want to form an unbeatable hegemony because that can choke the life out of it unless you have an active resistance to it. And that sort of stuff is good, but you need to have the players buying into keeping the health of the game and understand that you're playing a role. I know Robert's talked about it a little bit. You don't have to be a dick to act like a dick in the game. You don't have to be the hero to act like the hero in the game. You can play a role, you can have fun with it. It is a game at the end of the day. Make friends, do silly shit. Have a good time with what the sandbox you're in. Don't focus on the negative all the time.
Fair enough. I think the only other question that I saw for you was something about a D&D table.
Oh yeah, I got out of a long relationship a few years back, and my catharsis to get over that, and actually instead of sit around and mope, was to build a Dungeons & Dragons gaming table that had like power outlets, lights, a TV built into it, all this fun nerdy shit. I've been using it for many years. I've been running games. It's been going fucking great.
Good stuff. All right. I think that closes out this part unless there's something else that you would like to go over.
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. Final questions from the audience. Do you guys have anything that you would like to ask Cree?
The answer to Zig's question is yes.
No, nothing else for Pre. So there we go. Thank you again, Prefontaine. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And best of luck. I'm going to move him to the audience, and we are going to invite Mr. Hot Takes himself.
What up?
How are you, Zig? If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. How are you doing, Velyni?
Yeah. My bad. My speaker was messed up mobile.
No worries. How are things going with you?
Can't complain. Can't complain. Just actually, I was in vacation mode for a little bit, and right after, right after we pieced out, and I think I got 8 days left. So once that's over, we're back in.
Sounds good. Sounds like a battle plan. Alrighty. So I have brought on A for just general whatever. If you'd like to talk about something outside of the original topic, we can go there. But I have brought you on to discuss the idea of alliance-oriented politics and what it is that actually means.
Yeah. Well, first I'll talk about anything. You know, I'm not shy on feelings. So essentially, the idea behind it is to own your moves. Don't don't follow others' leads. Be able to think in your best interest and always work in your best interest without compromise. So, that's what alliance-centric politics mean to me.
Awesome. So, how do you describe the idea of sphere-oriented politics? What does that look like to you?
A group of individuals who collaborate for safety purposes and act in each other's interests. So to me, that's more of let's say like a 5-on-5 effort, as opposed to like you and a buddy carrying a team, and just kind of leaning on yourselves.
Makes sense. And do you view this kind of orientation as problematic?
I think it's problematic if you navigate it poorly. It's definitely it's like playing on the highest difficulty you can right out of the gate in a video game. You know what I mean? Like the risk reward is there. If you can play it well and you can pull it off, but if you slip up on it, it can be detrimental. So I think it can be problematic played the wrong way. As I would say, overall health of the game, no. I think it just gives an alternative method to not conform, if you will, when you have more options.
Makes sense. So it's not problematic for the game, but if you're playing it the wrong way, then you might end up, without anyone.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be. I mean, I would say the sweet spot, is getting into a position where you have the security you need to not essentially just be somebody who's going to get ran through for raiding, because you're by yourself, and finding a place where you can be transparent about your motives and kind of not, I would say not get overwhelmed with treaties, but just kind of make it clear, hey, this is where I stand with everybody, and you can kind of make a statement with some of those treaties that you make. I'm trying not to give you too much political bullshit. I don't want to keep it, I don't want to read the thought or anything. So
I am good either way, my friend. So comparatively, you kind of led with this. You view alliance-oriented as self-interest rather than group interest or the interests of others.
Yep.
Okay. And why do you think that this version works better than sphere oriented? And I know you haven't said that out of the gate, but given that that's kind of how you've approached playing the game, I think it's a reasonable assumption to make that you view it as the more ideal.
Yeah, I think I think it depends on where your alliance stands first and foremost. I think that's a big indicator. When we were, when I was over in TFP leading that, TFP in this environment at the time, it just wasn't the ideal time. Schwinn has them in a much better position to where, they can support that. They got new faces around, et cetera. And, they have a little more structure that has been more open minded with things. So I think where you are, what you can actually pull off is kind of the deciding factor on whether it's for you or not. I guess a comparison of this would be like your Gatos or, you look at UPN, those would be the people who would struggle, as opposed to like if you took a, maybe an upper echelon like a Immortals, they might be able to pull it off a little better just because of their tiering and their connections. I think are a little more favorable, than what other people's are.
Which makes sense. You always have some people that can play the game a little bit better than others.
Yeah, to me, I think, and this, I guess, is where I'm gonna get a little off, stay on the topic, but kind of stray off a bit on this. I think that's my biggest reason I campaigned for this, and I know that's what you were gonna, mention, at some point, is just kind of like why I think that's right was I think where you're going with it. When I look at the play style, and I think about the fun aspect of politics, sphere politics are very dog and pony show. Outside, and internally, it's just about people just want to listen and follow whatever orders get put. When you're building a block, you have your core members, and those couple core members that are essential to the block are your people with your, with the voice, with the tiering. Your clips are going to be power players. Somebody like a guardian who has a higher tier, they're gonna, their opinion's going to hold weight. And so, those people who can't, who don't have that political weight or that value, they just become yes men, and they eventually give in because it's safer to be a part of the sphere and have this this mutual defense rather than be on their own, where they really would struggle and not be able to combat. So they'll go against their ideals, they'll go against their morals, and eventually just give in for the safety of for their own security. So I'm completely against that. And not only that, but the CB reasons suck. I mean, when I'm not going to say all the time, there's some good ones that can definitely happen, but generally it's, oh, their tiering is a threat. Oh, they have upper tier. These guys are have 15 alliances over there, and the answers are always the same. You're essentially just trying to build the right numbers to overpower somebody, and I mean, there can be some fun, and situationally it gets there, but you have people like, I'm going to use Aurora as a perfect example. You look at Aurora, and they were in a block that they wanted to be proactive. They wanted to have some fun. They had their ideal way of changing their reputation and getting out there. Nobody else was getting on board. All of a sudden, they get kicked out, and then next thing you know, they're hitting them and so on and so forth. And when you look at the big scale of things, like, Aurora is built for that level. Like, they want to do stuff. They don't have to worry about, is the block going to agree or not. I think it's much worse to be tied to a block. Like, let's say Cataclysm right now. I'm tied with them. I think that if they did not have a tie with us, trying to get them to do something outside of their block there would be so much tugging and pulling and internal drama just because, oh, well, we don't want to be, in the crosshairs of hitting anybody,
Yes.
or any of this stuff.
Yes.
And so it just becomes stale. People aren't, they're not working. Like, it takes away an aspect of the game. I think it brings reluctancy. It brings just stuff that people are never going. Your average member ain't going to see. So here, I actually mentioned this earlier today. This house start CTO and TFP thing. This is a result of your O levels. This is exactly what Alliance Centric is about, because when you look at it, if these guys were block members, this fight doesn't happen. House start doesn't touch CTO. Nobody's going to get on board with that and let that be that sole reason. And so you look at it, and now you have two people who fought each other because it was secure. You have TFP, who actually, gets put in an interesting political situation where, do I choose an ally right now? Eventually, you would think that one of the two would force TFP to pick sides, whether, post-war or not. They're going to say, hey, you can't be tied to both of us after this. Like, I just don't think that's okay. So now TFP has to, navigate this political situation out of nowhere. And, they have to deal with Florida. They have to deal with the Guardian aspect. They have to look at, right now Schwinn's countering for some raids. And all these things have to be considered now. And I think that's an element that we wouldn't have if these O levels hadn't become so prominent.
It makes sense. Yeah, and I completely empathize actually with the whole reaching out to the whole people are so entrenched in the sphere that if somebody reaches out and says, hey, do you want to try to make something funny happen? It gets shut down immediately because, oh, well then, we'll get, there will be retaliation for it immediately.
Exactly.
That's an important point that I think gets skipped over, because that really kills a lot of the potential wars and politicking opportunity within the game by mandating, if you sign here, these are the only people you can work with, and you can't go do that with anybody else.
Right. Well, and I think another thing too is doing O levels. I like to believe I'm very transparent. The people I potentially am going to work with, I will, I have a treaty with. I mean, those are the people, they're there for a reason, whether it's optional defense, whether it's, optional aggression. These are people I look to as partners and I have favorable relations with. And that allows me not only to put kind of, I don't want to say my politics out there, but it allows you to see where I want. I'll get to that point in a second, actually, because that goes deeper. But you're being upfront about these defenses and so on and so forth. And so when you kind of look at it, you're playing a chess game, and you want them to, if it brings, you can't expect one of these people to do it, but you have to prepare for it. And a lot of time that can drive other wedges. I mean, what if hypothetically, I want to work, I'm close to somebody in Florida, and then I get hit and somebody's like, Requiem's going to jump in, we're going to go ahead and take them out. What if I'm really close to somebody over in Florida, and Florida, that person's like, what, I'm going to jump in and help KT out anyway, because we've been growing relations with them. Well, now all of a sudden that appears that Florida is assisting and defending, Requiem, as opposed to, in reality, they're just defending their relationship with us. And that puts them in an interesting political, position as well. So yeah. I think it really just keeps that out there. But what I was going to say about the treaty thing is I really take treaties for what they are. If it's tied there, it's there for a reason, and it should mean something. I think a lot of times people, we'll do these mock treaties, so on and so forth. And I know, I kind of talked with Piggy about this a while back. About the Aurora thing. I think I mentioned the debate channel, but you have this O level and it was sent to you, as a joke, but you kept it, and that ended up being utilized actually, whether directly or inadvertently. Coincidentally, it was still active when they did the set, and so now all of a
Yep.
sudden, like, do you, that's another thing now, and so, do I believe what they say? Do I not believe what they say? And then the other point is now all of a sudden, if you're going to take a joke like that, every time you sign something now, somebody's going to take that as literal. And, it just kind of, I think that it should, if you tie it, it should be there. You should honor that. You should, own up to it. I don't think there's any place for like the mock ones. No offense to Pika. I love Pika. But, if I see it, I'm taking it for what it is. So if I decide to hit your prots and I'm like, this is where it's gonna go, I'm gonna hit a prot, and you better hope it's not a fake one, because you're gonna get hit too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense. You can't look at the treaties and be like, well, maybe this one's real and maybe this one isn't, and you just
Exactly.
you have to call if it's not what it is, then don't have it on there, or have it as like if you want a tie that you don't have to actually do anything with. They invented the Payat for a reason.
Yep.
So but no, I that makes sense to me. Alrighty, what else did I have that I was going after you with here? Do O-level treaties actually act to facilitate alliance-oriented politics? And then on top of that, are they overall beneficial?
So, no, I don't agree. I mean, I just got very distracted. Sorry.
No worries.
Blame the wife. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. Repeat the question.
Oh boy.
For me.
Yeah, no. Do O-level treaties actually act to facilitate alliance-oriented politics?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, what other? I don't know. I get, unless I'm misunderstanding it for some reason. It seems pretty self-explanatory that it would be.
Okay, and then do they help the game overall?
Yeah, I mean,
there's been a lot of debate on that one.
I mean, like I said, I think the more options, the more play styles that are out there, the better it is for a game. I mean, we can't. I think that's where we are with the design game as well. I'm for one, I'm just going to talk war. I'm kind of like a sucker for the same old play style. Once I learn it, I don't want to, learn something new. So I'm a sucker for staying there. But some people want something different, and I think that if you want to retain these people, you have to have a way for them to, play the game they want to play. I mean, when you think about it, we have farming. You have some alliances who want that to be their whole role playing style. Some of these micros. I mean, when you look at the micro world, the nano world, and all these other places, we really have a foundation and a solid player base of people who have these alternative ideas. You know, they do these in-depth role plays internally. You know, their whole alliance, and including nation names and everything else, is structured. You know, our creativity is endless, and the more ways that we can attract and retain those people, the better it is, I think, for everybody. So, I mean, I just like I would never say O level's right for everybody, sphere level's right for everybody. You know, I think I just encourage people to do what they want to do and not feel like they have to conform to a way because nobody else is doing it.
Fair enough. I think a lot of the controversy that you can agree with on these O levels has been the potential for FA stagnancy when it comes to war. In that, for example, looking at let's use TKR Sphere. You know, launching a war against them, one might wonder if they should also be prepped to deal with Gato and KT.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I have discussed this to great length before about when KT is going to, you know, when KT would come in on a war and when KT would not. But anyone that had not had that level of discussion would not know that. And then it goes on to be, if you have that treaty, you kind of have the obligation to tell them. So, you know, if I'm some other major and I come to you, Velyni Vass, and I say, you know, if theoretically somebody hit TKR Sphere, and so they'd have to hit Cataclysm and Grumpy, but they hit TKR Sphere as a whole, would KT come in? And you tell me yes or no. Even if you tell me no, you're kind of obligated to go tell Cataclysm that, like, hey, be on the lookout for a war because people are asking us about hitting you. Which then, if you're looking for the blitz, if you're looking for the surprise advantage, or if, for example, like how Stark launched their assault on Carthago, Carthago wasn't milled. They had a few people that were 553, but they were generally on 0250. And so if there was a similar military advantage there, then it would almost be smarter to say, well, we don't know if KT will get involved or not, but let's just hit them anyways and include them in that. With this advantage, sure, it puts us in a tougher spot, but it's better than then having TKR Sphere all mill up because they know we're trying to prep a war against them, and now we're screwed out of a war.
I think, I'm with you on that. I think that's where things get interesting for me. If you're a good FA, okay, I personally will say that I'm very blunt when I need to be. I'm gonna kind of play my cards the way that they need to be played. Now, with that being said, how I do something might not be how somebody else does, right? So I think that's important to know what the capability of a person is and how they conduct themselves and what their reputation is. So an example of that might be somebody, yes, I may be obligated to talk to somebody. However, I would be a dumbass, quite frankly, to believe that everybody is going to 100% be honest with their treaty partners. I'm going to tell you that people will play in their best interest 1,000% of the time. I don't care if you're in a sphere or not in a sphere. You are always going to play to your best interest, and you might know that your ally is going to get hit, and you might not say a word. Why? Because you would rather keep that reputation or that repetition, with that party that came to you asking about the treaty in the future than the person who you're throwing under the bus right now. And so if you can, think about what the type of person you're working with is. That's going to tell you a lot about the approach and kind of that what way that's going to go for you. Somebody comes to somebody else and it might turn into, hey, as soon as I go to this person, they're going to know, we might as well just hit them instead. But if you know how somebody works and you can play, on their level, play the politics their way, then it's going to work in. And I think that's a big problem with FA in general recently, and that I've seen kind of go downhill, is that people aren't taking the time to get to know the individuals and their ideologies and everything else. They're doing some basic small talk and thinking that they can manipulate a situation just because. But you just gotta know how to talk to people. Put in that extra work, and then all of a sudden, I think you'll have less risk and be able to get clarity, not burn a bridge with somebody else on accident, because you hit me assuming I'm going to do it, and it's not something I would do. Now we're going to be looking out for you later, so you also don't want those slip ups.
Yes, I would agree there. It's a hard navigation, particularly then you get into like these chaining. Like, for example, I'll throw out the Aurora Borealis World Task Force Coal Mines, Lost Empire. The option to chain, I think, has also been something that's been brought up. I think that's a lesser part of these kinds of discussions, but it's an important part to bring up when you get into that optional aspect of helping or not helping. And as clear as you are, Velyni, I mean, I know exactly where KT stands on pretty much just about every war that could theoretically happen for you guys.
Yeah.
Others are not so clear or so willing to disclose. And in that area, I do think the whole just, sure, they may not like us after the fact, but include them regardless. I think that ends up being kind of self-inflicted by whoever doesn't want to clarify. And so that becomes more of something that they earn rather than like well, you could have clarified it and there wouldn't have been a problem.
Well, and I think the other thing is, by being direct too, if you think about it, as direct as it is, it's not as simple, right? So you can look at it and you're like, hey, KT won't do it if I do this, but if I do this, and then all of a sudden now you have to think, okay, well, if I don't do this and I do this instead, now this, and this has to be considered. There's a lot more that goes into your thought process. And you really have to look at everybody's treaties. If you're somebody with just a bunch of O levels, you have no M levels, you have nothing like that. If one O level hits another O level who has an O level with somebody who has an O level with somebody, now all of a sudden you end up in a 3-on-1 because everybody decided to pick each other's up. And that's something that could happen. So now you have to pay attention to other people's politics a little more than what you are. And I think that's the other part that really, adds the extra flavor is it's not just as simple as, hey, throw up a tiering chart. Oh yeah, we can win this tier. Here we go. We can roll these guys whenever we want. I'd rather have to have somebody actually do a little thinking and planning.
Fair enough. Do you foresee O's becoming continually more popular?
I think that there is maybe a couple more majors out there. Majors, I'm saying like influential alliances. I think there's about 2 more out there that will maybe join the fray. Otherwise, I think it'll pretty much stay the same size. it's not, the whole world ain't going to be like that. And I think like Rose, they're big no matter what they do. So what's the point in doing one way or another if there's really no benefit? I'd rather just take the sphere level than deal with everything else. So yeah, I mean, I guess to give you an answer, no, I don't think it'll be huge, but I think we'll get a couple more big players out there, and expand on what we already have and go from there. I mean, you just saw Aurora. They just tied with Cam.
Yes.
That's an interesting move. That tells you a little bit about where Aurora's at politically right now. In people's minds. That tells you where Camelot is, because now no longer just a bunch of Merlin Accord people and everything else. It's now they're branching out and getting a big dog, and they're both as we know offensive minded. So that creates another tier. They can do some damage.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we all have to pay attention, and I think I love that. I spend more time in my FA now actually doing productive things than I did in a block setting.
And I'll throw an open invitation, Epia. You're listening, whether you're actively listening or not. If you want to write something up on a comment on that, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to hear what the thought process behind that was. Velyni, I guess one of the last really thing here is you said you have a couple more in mind, a couple more people in mind who might join the Way of the O, but that's really it. Do you also foresee alliance-oriented politics becoming? It'll be a little more of a mainstay with spheres still being dominant, and you have a couple more people maybe that pick up this kind of alliance orientation, but in general, the world still sticks to spheres.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, I would say you look at Fortuna. You saw what just happened there. They just came out of that. They're not going to get targeted twice. So they know they have a little bit of time to get out. This could be a transitional period for them. You look at Odu. They added Grumpy, so I don't see anything really maybe going on there. And then you got a couple people in Rose Sphere right now. Eventually that I think you look at Rose and Paradise combined. That's a good relationship, but Paradise came from a smaller, tried to do a smaller thing before, so maybe they don't go back to it, but a Guardian could. So I think it just kind of depends on who these people are. I have my thoughts on my two, but yeah, I definitely think blocks are a mainstay here. I think maybe even the O level stuff dies off a little bit. It's going to go in cycles. You're going to have some people swapping out. So KT, just prime example. Maybe right now this is our play, but 4 years down the line we decide to change it up. So sometimes people are going to change based on what their alliance is like and their internals.
Of course. All right, I'll open it up to anything that you'd like to talk about. Anything other than that, or on the same topic?
No. I think I said in chat. Just I'm glad we're seeing some entertainment from TFE and House Stark and Carthago. So hopefully that gets resolved. I got friends in House Stark and CTO, so I'm kind of interested in just see what the resolution looks like over there, and how that whole scenario plays. Does TFP end up stuck with one or the other? Do they just bounce off and say, you know what, maybe I don't want to deal with either of you? Do one of them choose to leave TFP and just kind of make the decision for them? So just kind of glad to see that so quick after the next worm, not kind of a snooze period.
It is admittedly an interesting area to see, because any one of those situations, you leave Carthago as a free floater to add on to somebody's kind of group, or you cut House Stark and you put them to the O, and then maybe they grow closer to Florida. Or if TFP cuts both of them, then you have the same situation. Plus, you have both the individual situations. Plus, TFP now is loose. So all of those could be crazy, crazy things. All right. Questions from the audience for Vass.
They are
if
probably
any.
dead asleep. It's been 2.5 hours, Lysander.
I'm sure they are, but you know what? We can always ask. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to do one. We'll have to get you on for one that I don't leave you at the end of things.
It's all good, man. I appreciate the invite. Thanks, guys.
My pleasure. You're always a fun one to go back and forth with. So, alrighty. There is no theme, so thank all of you for joining in. I had a lot of fun, and maybe we'll have another Royal Orbis Radio in the future. Thanks again, and good night, everybody. That is the end. Big.